Emma pressed herself against Cole's Harley, her stepdad's shadow stretching toward her across the asphalt at the truck stop. The biker glanced down once. Everyone thought he'd tell her to move. But he stood up, cracked his knuckles, and what came out of his mouth made her stepdad's face go white. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. Emma pressed herself against Cole's Harley, her ripped sleeve exposing fresh bruises that looked like fingerprints burned into her skin. The truck stop lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh yellow. Her lip was split, bleeding slow, and her eyes held the kind of terror that came from knowing exactly what happened when you got caught. Rick Brennan stumbled toward her. 42 years old and drunk enough that his steps wavered, but not drunk enough to stop. His shadow stretched long across the asphalt, reaching for her before he did. Cole Maddox stood slowly from his bike, unfolding to his full 6'3". The leather vest with Road King's MC patch across his back, catching the light. His jaw was set, his hands loose at his sides, and when he spoke his voice cut through the night like gravel under tires. "You're gonna walk back to that truck. Get in. Drive away. And if I ever see you within 100 yards of this girl again, they'll be pulling pieces of you out of the gravel for weeks." The words landed like stones. Rick's face drained of color, recognition flickering behind the alcohol haze. He'd seen Cole before, heard the stories. His cousin Jimmy had crossed the Road Kings 5 years back over a drug deal gone wrong, ended up serving 8 years after the club made sure every bit of evidence found its way to the right hands. 2 more bikers emerged from the diner, Marcus with his gray beard and 52 years of road wisdom, Dean with the kind of quiet strength that came from knowing when to speak and when to let silence do the work. They flanked Cole without a word, a wall of leather and loyalty. Rick's bravado cracked but didn't break. "She's mine," he said, his voice rising. "Her mother left her to me. Legal custody. You got no right." Emma's whisper cut through his bluster like a knife. "Mom didn't leave me to him. She died trying to get me away from him." Cole's jaw tightened, something flickering behind his eyes that went deeper than simple anger. It looked like recognition, like memory, like a wound that never quite healed. Rick pointed a shaking finger at Emma. "I'll be back with the sheriff. She's 15. She's got nowhere to go. You can't keep her." But he was already backing up, already retreating to his truck. He knew when he was outmatched. His taillights disappeared into the darkness, red eyes fading down Route 40, but everyone standing there knew he'd be back. Men like Rick always came back. Cole knelt to Emma's eye level, his knees cracking slightly, getting down where she could see his face without looking up. "What's your name?" he said, and his voice had gone soft. The edge filed off. Something passed across Cole's face, quick as a shadow, gone before Emma could read it. Marcus appeared with a bottle of water and a first aid kit from his saddlebag, the kind of supplies bikers kept on hand for road emergencies, now pressed into service for something that mattered more. Emma's story came out in fragments. 3 years with Rick. Her mother Catherine dead 8 months in a car crash that happened on a straight road on a clear day. Rick had legal custody, was her stepfather, had married her mother 4 years ago when Emma was 11. The bruises weren't new. The fear wasn't either. She'd run 3 days ago, been hiding at the truck stop, sleeping in the bathroom, stealing food from the vending machines when no one was looking. She saw the bikes pull in, and something in her understood that these men, for all their intimidating presence, were safer than the man who was supposed to protect her. Inside the diner, Cole made a call. Within 20 minutes, 5 more bikes roared into the parking lot. Wade, Travis, Logan, Brett, Dustin, the Brotherhood assembled. They filled a back booth, leather and denim, and the smell of road and exhaust. Speaking in low, urgent voices about safe houses and lawyers and what came next. Betty, who'd owned this diner for 40 years and fed these same bikers for 20 of them, brought coffee without being asked, and told Emma the back room was hers for as long as she needed. Dean called his wife Rachel, a nurse at County General, who arrived within 30 minutes still in her scrubs. She took Emma to the bathroom, examined her privately, documented injuries with the professional detachment necessary for evidence and the gentle care necessary for healing. Photographs were taken. A written statement was drafted. Emma sat at a corner table and ate a turkey sandwich like she hadn't seen food in days, because she nearly hadn't, and tried not to cry, because crying meant acknowledging how bad things had gotten. Marcus leaned close to Dean at the counter, his voice low but not low enough. "You see his face when she said the name. When's the last time we saw him look like that?" Dean's response was barely a whisper. "Not since Lexington. Not since Melissa." Across the room, Cole stood by the window, staring out at nothing, his reflection ghostly in the glass. Behind his eyes played a memory he'd buried deep. A girl with dark hair and scared eyes, someone he'd failed to save. Someone whose name he still couldn't speak without feeling like he was choking. Emma looked enough like her to be a ghost. Travis, who'd been a paralegal before he'd been a biker, laid out the legal reality with brutal honesty. Rick had custody. Emma was a minor, without concrete proof of abuse that would hold up in family court. She'd be returned to him. The photographs helped. Rachel's medical report helped, but judges were cautious about removing children from legal guardians, especially based on a runaway's word against a stepfather's. Emma's eyes went wide with panic, the sandwich forgotten in her hands. "There's more," she said. "Mom kept journals. Hid them. I know where." The room went quiet. "Where?" Cole asked. "My house. Under the floorboard in my room. There's a loose panel under my bed." She documented everything, years of it, and her phone. She hid her phone there too, the one Rick didn't know about. There's photos, messages, voice recordings. Risk assessment was immediate. Going back meant confronting Rick again, meant entering his territory, meant exposure and danger. But evidence was evidence, and without it Emma would be back in that house by morning with a court order and nothing anyone could do about it. Cole's decision was instant. Then we go get them. Tonight. He knelt in front of Emma again, this time taking her hands in his rough, calloused palms against her small, cold fingers. "I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to believe me. You're not going back to that house to live. You're not going back to him. Whatever it takes, legal or otherwise, that man will never touch you again. I promise you that." Emma's walls crumbled. She'd been holding it together for 3 days, for 8 months, for 3 years. And suddenly she couldn't anymore. Tears came hard and silent, the kind that shook your whole body. Cole's hand rested on her shoulder, steady and sure. "But you gotta trust me. Trust us. Can you do that?" Emma nodded, unable to speak. "Why are you helping me?" she finally managed. "You don't even know me." Cole's face was unreadable, but his voice carried weight that went beyond this moment. "This girl. This night. Let's just say I know what it costs when nobody helps. I won't let that bill come due again." 20 minutes later, 3 bikes rolled out of the parking lot. Cole, Marcus, Wade. Emma rode behind Cole, her arms wrapped around his waist, first time ever on a motorcycle. The engine rumbled beneath them like a living thing, powerful and purposeful. Wind tore at her hair, cold October air that smelled like rain coming and leaves dying and something else. Something that felt like freedom, or at least the promise of it. She gave directions over his shoulder, voice barely audible over the engine. Left at County Road 7, right after the grain silo. 3rd house past the church with the broken sign. 20 minutes of dark country roads, no streetlights, just the bike's headlights cutting through the black. Emma's fear built with every mile, going back to the place where she'd learned what terror really meant. But the solid presence of Cole in front of her, the rumble of Marcus and Wade flanking them, reminded her she wasn't going back alone. The house appeared, small ranch style, Rick's truck in the driveway, most lights off except the TV glow from the living room where he'd be passed out or close to it. 11:43. Right on schedule. Strategy was quick and quiet. Emma through the bedroom window, ground level, easy access. Marcus watching the front. Wade covering the back. Cole assisting Emma, ready to pull her out fast if needed. 5 minutes maximum. In and out. Emma's window slid open with familiar ease. She'd climbed out of it enough times, escaping to anywhere that wasn't here. Now she was climbing back in for the last time. Her room looked like a crime scene. And in a way it was. Hole in the wall where Rick's fist had gone through when she'd talked back last month. Broken lamp from when he'd thrown it at her head. And missed. Her things ransacked, drawers pulled out, clothes scattered, evidence of his rage after she'd run. She dropped to her knees by the bed, fingers finding the loose panel, pulling it up. 4 spiral notebooks, the kind her mother had used for grocery lists and to-do lists, and, as it turned out, for documenting her own slow murder. Emma's hands shook as she touched her mother's handwriting. Years of careful records, dates and times, and injuries and threats. She shoved them in her backpack along with clothes grabbed at random, her mother's silver necklace, the photo album she'd hidden because Rick had threatened to burn it. And then she found it. Her mother's phone, the secret one, still charged, protected by a password Emma knew. She turned it on. Emma's face at 12, 13, 14, bruised and broken in systematic documentation. Text messages to a domestic violence shelter, voice recordings of Rick's threats, her mother's pleas. Evidence that could put him away forever. From the living room, movement. Rick's voice, slurred and confused, calling her name. Time to move. Cole's whisper came through the window. Urgent and low. Now. Emma grabbed the phone, shoved it deep in her pocket, scrambled for the window. Behind her, the bedroom door banged open. Rick's roar shook the walls. "Emma! Get back here!" Cole's hands caught her, pulled her through, Marcus and Wade materializing from the shadows as Rick stumbled onto the front lawn. "She's leaving," Cole said, his voice flat and cold as winter steel. "The journals. The phone. It's over." Rick charged, drunk and furious, and cornered. Marcus and Wade moved like they'd done this dance before, blocking his path without striking, just solid walls of muscle and leather. Rick's rage poured out. "I'll have every cop in the county here. You're kidnapping a minor." Cole's response was calculated, every word measured. "Call them. We've got Betty's diner on camera, showing her running to us with fresh injuries. We've got a nurse's medical report. We've got these journals. Make the call, Rick. See what happens." Rick froze, calculation cutting through alcohol, realizing he was trapped. But he wasn't done. "This isn't over. She's my daughter, legally. I'll get her back." Cole stepped closer, his voice dropping to something deadly quiet. "If you try, you'll learn exactly what this club does to men who hurt kids. Your cousin learned. You want that education?" Rick's face went white. He stood there, fists clenched, but he didn't move forward. The threat was real, and he knew it. The bikes fired up, 3 engines in perfect synchronization. Emma climbed on behind Cole. Looked back once. Rick stood silhouetted in the doorway, fist raised to the sky like he was shaking it at God or fate or anyone who'd listen. Emma wrapped her arms around Cole's waist and pressed her face against his leather vest. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing he couldn't hear her over the engine but saying it anyway. "We're just getting started," Cole said. And she felt the words through his back more than heard them. The ride back took forever, and no time at all. Emma watched the house disappear behind them, taking with it 3 years of terror and a lifetime of trauma, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the evidence in her bag and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of being protected by people who owed her nothing except a promise made to a man she barely remembered. The diner appeared ahead, Betty's sign glowing like a beacon, 12:47 in the morning. Other bikers waited, engines silent, watching the road. When Cole's bike pulled in, they straightened, alert, ready. Betty stood in the doorway, coffee pot in hand like a weapon. Emma climbed off the bike, legs shaky, adrenaline finally crashing into exhaustion. Inside, under the fluorescent lights, the journals were spread across the table. Emma's mother's words, years of them, careful and clear and heartbreaking. Betty poured coffee. Marcus found blankets. Rachel appeared again, checking Emma over, making sure the mission hadn't cost her anything more than she'd already lost. Cole stood by the window again, phone to his ear, talking to someone in low, urgent tones about lawyers and court dates and morning hearings. He hung up, turned to the room. To Emma, sitting small and exhausted in the corner booth. "We need a lawyer," he said. "A real one. This goes to court Monday." Emma nodded, too tired to be scared anymore. She'd made it out. She had the evidence. She had these strange, fierce men between her and the monster who'd stolen her childhood. For the first time in 3 years, she closed her eyes and didn't see Rick's face waiting behind them. She saw the road ahead, dark and uncertain, but finally leading somewhere else. Emma woke at 7 in the morning on a cot Betty had set up in the back room. Disoriented for 3 full seconds before memory crashed back like cold water. The journals, the phone, Rick's face in the doorway. Cole's promise. She sat up slowly, her body aching from 3 days on the run and 1 night of finally sleeping, really sleeping, without one eye open listening for footsteps. The smell of coffee drifted through the door, strong and bitter and real. She stood, still wearing the clothes Betty had given her, and pushed through into the diner's main room. Cole was already there, bent over one of the spiral notebooks at a corner booth. Travis beside him, with reading glasses perched on his nose. They looked up when she entered, and something in Cole's expression made her stomach drop. It was worse than she thought. It was all there in black and white. Her mother's careful handwriting documenting 3 years of hell. Travis pushed a plate toward her, eggs and toast still warm, and Emma sat without speaking. She ate because she needed to, not because she tasted anything. Cole slid the journal across the table, open to a page dated 2 years ago. Emma read her mother's words. "Rick hit me tonight. Not the first time. Won't be the last. He says if I leave, he'll take Emma somewhere I'll never find her. He says he'll make sure I never see her again. I believe him. I'm scared." The entries continued, systematic and heartbreaking. Catherine Hartwell had married Rick 2 years after Emma's biological father died, when grief and loneliness had made her vulnerable, and Rick had seemed like stability, like safety, like someone who could help raise her daughter. By the time she realized what he really was, it was too late. He'd isolated her, controlled the money, threatened everything she loved, and then he'd started hitting Emma. That's when Catherine started planning to leave. She documented everything. The escalating violence, the hiding of money, $20 here, $50 there, tucked away in places Rick wouldn't find. The research into shelters and lawyers and escape routes. The final entries were dated 3 days before the car crash that killed her. If you're reading this, Emma, I'm gone. But you're stronger than you know. You're your father's daughter. Fight. Survive. Find people who love you, and know that I loved you enough to die trying to free you. Emma's hands shook as she set the journal down. She was going to leave him the day she died, Emma said, her voice raw. She was coming to get me from school. She never made it. Travis pulled out Catherine's phone, the one Emma had grabbed from under the floorboard. Voice recordings played. Rick's threats crystal clear. Catherine's pleas for him to stop. Photos showed injuries on both Catherine and Emma, dated and time-stamped, systematic documentation of abuse. Text messages to a domestic violence shelter, to lawyers, to Sarah Morrison, Emma's aunt, who Emma hadn't seen in 4 years because Rick had cut off all contact with Catherine's family. The implication hung in the air like smoke. The car crash on a straight road, clear day. Catherine's brakes failing at exactly the moment she was planning to escape. Travis looked at Cole, then at Emma. "This is strong evidence," he said. "Strong enough for an emergency protective order, strong enough for CPS to get involved. But it's Saturday. Courts don't open until Monday. And Rick has legal custody right now, which means he could file charges. Say we kidnapped you. Emma felt the walls closing in again. So, what do we do? Cole stood, pulled his phone from his pocket, walked outside into the morning light. Emma watched through the window as he made a call, saw his posture change, saw something like relief cross his face. When he came back in 15 minutes later, he looked different, lighter somehow. She's been looking for you since your mother died. Rick blocked her, changed your school, moved twice, made sure she couldn't find you. She's 3 hours away. She'll be here by noon. Emma's heart stuttered. Aunt Sarah. She remembered a woman with kind eyes and her father's smile, remembered visits that stopped happening after Rick came into their lives. How did you know to call her? Emma asked. Cole sat down across from her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. I knew your father, he said quietly. Daniel Hartwell. We served together in Afghanistan. The room went still. Emma stared at him, trying to process. You knew my dad? Cole nodded. He saved my life. Ambush outside Kandahar, 2008. Took fire that was meant for me. He died in my arms. The world tilted sideways. Emma's father had died when she was 6, distant and heroic in her memory. A soldier who'd given everything for his country. She hadn't known there were men still alive who'd known him, who remembered him, who carried pieces of him forward. What did he say? She whispered. Before he died, Cole's voice was rough. He said, promise me. If anything happens, watch over my girls, Catherine and Emma. Promise me. I promised him. Then I failed. Lost track of you after Catherine married Rick. Searched for years but couldn't find you. Until you said your name. Until I saw your face. Emma Hartwell. Daniel's daughter. Marcus knew. Cole continued. That's why he called me the second you appeared at that truck stop. That's why I can't let anything happen to you. I owed your father my life. I won't fail his daughter. Emma's tears came hot and fast. She'd spent 8 months thinking she was alone in the world, that everyone who'd ever loved her was gone. Now here was this fierce, scarred man telling her he'd known her father, had made a promise 17 years ago, had been searching for her without even knowing she needed saving. You didn't fail, she said, her voice breaking. You're here now. That's what matters. At noon, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot, and Sarah Morrison stepped out. 41 years old, professional in a blazer and slacks, but her composure cracked the second she saw Emma standing in the diner doorway. The reunion was collision. Aunt and niece, clutching each other like drowning people grabbing lifelines. I tried to find you, Sarah said into Emma's hair. He blocked everything. Every legal avenue. Every attempt to make contact. I'm so sorry. Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. Mom talked about you. In the journals. She was going to call you. The day she died. Sarah's face went pale. The journals. You have them? Inside, spread across the booth, they laid out the evidence. Sarah read with the professional detachment of a lawyer and the breaking heart of a sister. Catherine's words detailing years of abuse, plans for escape, the systematic isolation that kept her trapped. The phone recordings played and Sarah's hands clenched into fists. The photos loaded and Sarah's tears finally came. This is enough, she said finally. More than enough. Emergency protective order Monday morning. CPS investigation. Criminal investigation into Catherine's death. But we need to survive the weekend. By 2 in the afternoon, the full Road Kings chapter had assembled. 23 motorcycles lined up outside the diner like a cavalry formation. Cole stood in the parking lot and addressed them, explaining Emma's situation, the promise to Daniel, the legal exposure they all faced by harboring a minor against her legal guardian's wishes. The question hung heavy. They could face charges. Kidnapping. Unlawful detention. The club had worked too hard to stay clean, to build relationships with local law enforcement, to prove they were more than the stereotypes people assumed. This could unravel everything. Marcus stepped forward. This is what we do, he said, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "We protect our own. This girl is Daniel Hartwell's daughter, brother who served with our president, who died in his arms. That makes her family." The vote was unanimous. Emma receives full club protection. Betty offered her apartment above the diner, the one she kept but rarely used since moving in with her daughter. Road Kings established protection rotation. 3 members on guard at all times, shifts changing every 6 hours. Emma stood watching this mobilization in her honor, overwhelmed by strangers who'd become family overnight. Dean's wife, Rachel, appeared again, took Emma aside, explained how this community worked. The club wasn't just men on motorcycles. It was wives and kids, and people who'd been helped along the way. It was chosen family, bound not by blood, but by loyalty and shared values, and the simple principle that you protected people who couldn't protect themselves. Late afternoon, Cole took Emma for a walk. Wade and Marcus followed at a distance, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. They walked along the road behind the diner, where the land opened into fields turning gold with October. "Tell me about him," Emma said. "My dad. What was he like?" Cole's stories painted Daniel Hartwell in vivid strokes. A man who laughed too loud and took nothing seriously except the people he loved, who could field strip a rifle in 30 seconds and cry at movies, who talked about his wife and daughter every night before sleep, showing photos to anyone who'd look, planning the life he'd build when he came home. Cole pulled a photo from his wallet, creased and faded. Him and Daniel in desert fatigues, Daniel holding baby Emma, all 3 of them grinning at a camera held by Catherine somewhere beyond the frame. "I barely remember him," Emma whispered, tracing her father's face. "I was only 6 when he died." Cole's voice was thick. "I promised him I'd watch over you. I failed. For years I failed. I looked, but I couldn't find you." "I won't fail again." Emma met his eyes. "You didn't fail. You're here now. That's what matters." Something passed between them. The beginning of a bond that transcended blood, surrogate father and rescued daughter, finding each other through tragedy and promise, and the strange mercy of second chances. At 6 that evening, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the diner parking lot. Deputy Williams stepped out, a fair man who'd worked this county for 20 years and knew the Road Kings as complicated but generally honorable. Rick had filed a complaint. Kidnapping, unlawful detention of a minor, motorcycle gang intimidation. Williams needed to verify Emma's safety, speak with her privately. The club members tensed but didn't obstruct. They knew the difference between protecting and interfering, knew that Williams was one of the good ones, knew that cooperation now would matter in court Monday. Emma sat across from Williams in a booth, Sarah present as her attorney. She showed her injuries without shame, explained running away. 3 days of hiding before the truck stop, the bikers who'd offered protection when no one else would. Williams examined the evidence, the photographs, Rachel's medical report, listened to voice recordings that made his jaw tighten. His red was clear. He believed Emma, but legally, Rick had custody until a court said otherwise. "I can't force you to go back tonight," Williams said carefully. "Based on what I'm seeing, I'm filing a report supporting your protective order Monday. But understand, Rick could get another deputy, could push the issue. You might not have a choice." Emma nodded, grateful for even this small mercy. At 8 that evening, Rick appeared. He brought reinforcements, his 3 brothers, known troublemakers who'd spent more time in county lockup than out. 4 men against 15 bikers. The odds didn't favor them, but desperation made people stupid. Rick's rage poured out across the parking lot. "She's mine! Her mother's dead! I'm all she's got!" Emma felt Sarah's hand on her arm, Cole's presence at her back. Something inside her, something that had been broken and beaten and terrified for 3 years, suddenly refused to bend anymore. She walked out to face him. "You're not my father," she said, her voice carrying in the evening quiet. "You never were. You killed my mom and you tried to kill me. I'm not going back." Rick's face went purple. He charged forward. Marcus moved to block him, and Rick swung wild, fist connecting with Marcus's jaw. The brief scuffle that followed was controlled violence. Road Kings subduing Rick and his brothers with a tactical restraint of men who knew excessive force would destroy their case. Deputy Williams, still present, witnessed everything. He arrested Rick for assault, cuffed him while Rick screamed threats. Monday, Rick spat as Williams loaded him into the cruiser. "Family court. You'll be back in my house by Monday night. All of you will go down for this." The night that followed was tense vigil. Club locked down the diner. Emma lay in Betty's apartment upstairs, exhausted but unable to sleep. Sarah beside her on the couch. Below, Cole stood watch by the window, won't sleep, watching for threats that might materialize. Wade joined him, offered coffee, offered companionship in the dark hours. "Brother, she's safe," Wade said. "We got her." Cole's fear was raw. "Until Monday, until the court. What if we're not enough? What if they send her back?" Wade's assurance was absolute. "Then we have contingencies. We'll get her out of state if we have to. Daniel's daughter doesn't go back to that monster." Emma heard them through the open window, these men discussing risking prison for her, planning escape routes if the legal system failed. She picked up her mother's journal, read the final entry again by lamplight. "You're stronger than you know. You're your father's daughter. Fight." Sunday morning brought strategy. Sarah laid out the plan with legal precision. Emergency protective order hearing Monday morning. Evidence presentation including journals, phone, medical reports, testimony. Witnesses lined up, Cole explaining his connection to Daniel. Betty establishing community support. Deputy Williams confirming the assault. The risk was real. Family courts were cautious, biased toward maintaining current custody arrangements, skeptical of dramatic intervention. Emma would have to testify. Would have to be brave enough to tell her truth in front of judges and Rick and everyone. Cole's promise renewed one more time. "Whatever happens Monday, you're not going back. Period." Emma believed him. More than that, she believed herself. She'd run. She'd survived. She'd found people willing to fight for her. Monday would bring its verdict. But whatever came, she wouldn't face it alone. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. The kind of October day that promised winter just beyond the horizon. County Family Court opened at 9, and by 8:30 the parking lot was filling with vehicles. Emma sat in Sarah's sedan wearing a modest blue dress Betty had provided, her hands twisted together in her lap, watching people in suits carry briefcases toward the courthouse doors. Cole pulled up on his Harley, cleaned and polished for the occasion, wearing his leather vest over a pressed black shirt. It was a statement, not of disrespect but of identity. He was who he was, and he wouldn't apologize for it. 5 more bikes followed, Marcus and Dean and Wade and Travis and Logan, forming an escort that turned heads and raised eyebrows but made Emma feel safer than any security detail ever could. Inside, Judge Patricia Hernandez presided. 62 years old with steel-gray hair and a reputation for fairness earned over 3 decades on the bench. She'd seen everything family court could throw at her, every shade of custody dispute and abuse allegation and parental failure. Emma sat at the plaintiff's table beside Sarah, trying to breathe steady, trying to remember everything they'd practiced. Across the aisle, Rick sat with a public defender, his face still bruised from Saturday's arrest, but his posture carefully composed. He'd cleaned up, wore a button-down shirt, was attempting to project the image of a respectable single father wronged by a rebellious teenager and manipulative strangers. The public defender opened with calculated sympathy. Rick Brennan was Emma's legal guardian, appointed after her mother's tragic death 8 months prior. He was a grieving widower trying to raise a difficult adolescent alone. Emma had run away due to normal parental discipline, fallen in with a dangerous motorcycle club who'd exploited her vulnerability and turned her against the only family she had left. The defender presented custody documents, school records showing Emma's declining grades and increased tardiness, painting a picture of troubled teen rather than abused child. Rick took the stand, his testimony smooth and practiced. He portrayed himself as overwhelmed, struggling, doing his best in impossible circumstances. Emma's injuries were from falling, from her own clumsiness, from anything except his hands. He denied violence with the conviction of a man who'd convinced himself his own lies were truth. Sarah Morrison rose like vengeance in business casual. She presented the journals first. Catherine Hartwell's careful documentation spanning 3 years, systematic evidence of escalating abuse. Each entry was dated, detailed, corroborated by the next. She presented medical photographs showing injuries too patterned to be accidental, Rachel's professional nursing assessment noting defensive wounds and impact patterns consistent with assault. Then came the phone evidence. And the courtroom went silent. Catherine's voice played through speakers, begging Rick to stop, promising she'd do better, promising she wouldn't leave. Rick's voice followed, threats so vicious they made the stenographer flinch. Photos loaded on the projection screen. Emma's face at 12 and 13 and 14, bruised and broken in ways that told their own story. Text messages to a domestic violence shelter, to lawyers, to Sarah Morrison herself, Catherine's desperate attempts to find a way out. Deputy Williams testified next, describing the scene Saturday evening, the assault he'd witnessed, the evidence he'd reviewed. His professional opinion that Emma was in immediate danger. Betty took the stand after him, a pillar of the community for 40 years, describing Emma's terror at the truck stop. The biker's protective response, the girl who'd been too scared to ask for help until she literally had nowhere else to turn. Then Sarah called Emma. The walk to the witness stand felt like miles. Emma's hand shook as she placed it on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat in the chair that suddenly felt too big. Sarah's voice was gentle, guiding her through the story Emma had lived but never spoken aloud. "Tell us about the night your mother died." Emma's words came slow at first, then faster. 3 years of pain pouring out. Her mother had been planning to leave, had hidden money and made arrangements, and was coming to get Emma from school the day the crash happened. The car went off the road on a straight stretch, brakes failing on a vehicle that had passed inspection 2 weeks prior. After Catherine died, Rick got worse. The abuse that had been hidden became blatant. He controlled everything. Isolated Emma, threatened her with the same fate as her mother if she told anyone. The week before Emma ran, his violence reached a level that made her understand she'd die if she stayed. He'd wrapped his hands around her throat and whispered he'd send her where her mother went. So she ran. 3 days of hiding, of hunger, of being so scared she couldn't think straight. Then the truck stop. The bikers. Cole. Safety found in the last place she expected. Emma looked directly at Judge Hernandez. "He killed my mother. I know it. And if I go back, he'll kill me too." Sarah turned to Rick for cross-examination, and his composure began to crack. Her questions were surgical, pointing out convenient timing, insurance money, Catherine's isolation in the months before her death. Rick's responses grew defensive, his mask of reasonable father slipping. The crucial moment came when he referred to Emma as ungrateful. Claimed he'd given her a home after her father abandoned them by dying. Sarah's objection was sharp. Emma's father was Staff Sergeant Daniel Hartwell, killed in action in Afghanistan. Rick's face flushed. The mask fell completely. "She's mine," he said, voice rising. "I can do what I want." Judge Hernandez's rebuke was immediate and sharp. Rick's attorney scrambled for damage control, but the damage was done. Cole took the stand next, and Rick's confusion was visible. He didn't know this connection. Hadn't realized the biker who'd confronted him at the truck stop had any tie to Emma beyond random intervention. Cole's testimony was steady. Military background presented first. Service record clean. He'd served with Daniel Hartwell, had been there when Daniel died, saving his life in an ambush outside Kandahar. Daniel's final words were a request, a plea, a promise extracted. Cole had tried, had looked for years after losing contact, had carried guilt like stones for his failure to find them. Then Emma appeared at a truck stop, spoke her name, and 17 years of searching ended in a moment. Cole's character was established. 25 years as club president. No criminal record. Community respected despite, or perhaps because, of the leather and motorcycles. His commitment was absolute. I promised her father I'd protect his girls. I failed once. I won't fail again. Judge Hernandez's expression shifted, visible consideration crossing her face. This wasn't random bikers exploiting a vulnerable child. This was family, chosen and bound by debt and honor, fulfilling a promise made in blood and desperation. The court recessed for deliberation. Hallway tension was thick enough to choke on. Emma paced, Sarah's hand on her shoulder doing nothing to calm the terror that the judge would send her back, that all this evidence wouldn't be enough, that the system would fail her the way it had failed so many others. Rick glared across the hallway, his public defender whispering urgently in his ear. The Road Kings formed a subtle barrier. Bodies positioned between Emma and any threat. Silent guardians waiting for the verdict that would determine if their protection had been enough. 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. The bailiff called them back. Judge Hernandez took her time, reading from prepared notes, her voice carrying the weight of a decision that would alter lives irrevocably. She found credible evidence of systematic abuse. Catherine's journals were compelling, detailed, corroborated by medical evidence and testimony. The phone recordings demonstrated a clear pattern of violence and threats. Emma's testimony was credible, consistent, supported by every piece of evidence presented. Rick's guardianship had been obtained after Catherine's death. No blood relation to Emma, no inherent right beyond legal paperwork. Most critically, Judge Hernandez noted sufficient evidence to question the circumstances of Catherine Hartwell's death and was ordering a police investigation into potential foul play. The ruling came swift and decisive. Emergency protective order granted immediately. Rick Brennan must stay 500 yards from Emma Hartwell at all times. Temporary custody awarded to Sarah Morrison, biological aunt and appropriate guardian. Supervised visitation denied due to threat level and credible fear of harm. Further hearings scheduled for Rick's parental rights termination proceedings. Rick exploded. The courtroom erupted with his rage. "You can't do this. She's mine." The bailiff moved, but Rick was already on his feet, pointing at Emma, threats pouring out. "I'll appeal. I'll find you. You can't hide from me." Judge Hernandez's gavel cracked like thunder. "Contempt of court. 30 days jail time. Remove him." Rick fought as they dragged him out, still screaming, still threatening, his true nature finally visible to everyone in the room. Emma collapsed into Sarah's arms, relief and terror and exhaustion hitting all at once. The tears came hard, years of them, the kind that shook her whole body and left her gasping. On the courthouse steps, media had gathered, word having spread about the unusual case of bikers protecting a teenager from her guardian. Cameras flashed as Cole made a brief statement, his voice carrying across the crowd. "We protect our own. Emma is family. That's all." The community reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Townspeople who knew Betty, who'd seen the Road Kings around for decades, who understood that not all families looked traditional, expressed support. Diner regulars cheered as Emma's car drove past. Back at Betty's diner, a celebration meal waited. Emma's emotional release continued. Finally safe, finally believed, finally free from the constant terror that had defined her existence for 3 years. Sarah outlined next steps: permanent custody filing, new school enrollment, therapy arrangements to help Emma process trauma and begin healing. Cole stood by the window, quiet satisfaction on his face. Promise fulfilled. Redemption achieved. The burden he'd carried for 17 years finally lifted. Around him, the club recognized what they'd accomplished. This was why they rode together, why they built this brotherhood, why they'd chosen this life. Protection, loyalty, family. 2 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and transition. Emma settled into Sarah's home 40 minutes from the town where Rick had held her prisoner. New school enrollment complete. Counseling sessions started. healing beginning in small increments. Rick sat in jail pending trial, and police investigation into Catherine's death revealed what Emma had known in her bones. Tampered brake lines, premeditated murder, additional charges filed, vehicular homicide, first-degree murder, child abuse spanning years. Rick's parental rights were formally terminated. Sarah received permanent custody. Emma was legally, finally, truly safe. Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after the verdict, Emma asked Sarah to drive her to the diner. It was the Road Kings' weekly gathering, bikes lined up in the parking lot like a reunion of old friends. Emma walked in carrying a box of homemade cookies. Betty's recipe that she'd learned in the apartment above this very building. The welcome she received was genuine affection. Rough men with soft hearts calling her by name, asking about school, treating her like the unofficial mascot she'd become. Emma presented a gift, carefully wrapped. Inside was a framed photograph of Staff Sergeant Daniel Hartwell in dress uniform, young and proud and alive. She'd asked Sarah for the photo, had it professionally mounted and framed. The inscription read, "Daniel Hartwell, brother, hero, father, his promise kept." The emotional impact on these hardened bikers was visible. Marcus's eyes went wet. Dean cleared his throat roughly. Cole took the frame with hands that shook slightly. Studying the face of the man who'd saved his life, whose daughter he'd finally saved in return. "It's going on the wall," Wade said, and everyone agreed. "Right behind the bar where everyone can see it." Cole and Emma stepped outside. Private moment needed among all the celebration. Emma's hands traced the chrome of his Harley, the machine that had been both shield and chariot. "I want to learn to ride," she said. "When I'm older, will you teach me?" Cole's smile was real and reached his eyes. "Your dad taught me to shoot." Fair trade. They talked about healing, about the nightmares that still came but were decreasing, about the therapy that was helping Emma process trauma and reclaim her life. Cole's check-in was gentle but persistent. "You doing okay? Really okay?" Emma's answer was honest. "Some days are hard. I miss my mom. But I'm safe now. Because of you. Because of all of you." Then she asked the question that mattered most. "Do you think my dad would be proud of how I fought?" Cole's voice went thick with emotion. "Daniel was the bravest man I ever knew. You're every bit his daughter. He'd be so damn proud." Inside the diner, the celebration continued. Emma met other club families, wives and children, and people who'd been helped along the way, realizing this was her extended family now. The family she'd chosen and who'd chosen her. Stories were shared around tables, club members revealing their own difficult pasts, their own journeys to redemption, their own experiences of found family. Betty raised a glass in toast. To Emma. To courage. To family that's built, not born. Sarah approached Cole in a quiet moment, gratitude overwhelming her professional composure. "I can't repay what you did. What the club did." Cole's response was simple. "No repayment needed. Daniel saved my life. This was the least I could do." Sarah shook her head. "It wasn't the least. You saved her life. You gave her future back." Understanding passed between them. Sarah would keep Emma connected to this community, to the men who'd protected her, to the chosen family that had formed in crisis and would endure through peace. Emma sat alone for a moment. New journal open in front of her, pen in hand. She wrote words that felt like both ending and beginning. "My mom wrote that strength isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and fighting anyway. She was right. She fought for me. And when I needed help, people fought for me too. I have a new family now. Aunt Sarah, Betty, Rachel, and the Road Kings, especially Cole. My dad made Cole promise to watch over me. But Cole did more than that. He gave me my life back. Mom's journals end with her death. This journal begins with my life." Sunset painted the parking lot gold and orange. Emma climbed onto Cole's Harley, parked and stationary, hands on the handlebars, imagining. "Someday you'll ride your own. Cole said. When you're ready. Emma looked up at him. Will you still be around to see it? Cole's hand rested on her shoulder, solid and sure. Emma, I made your father a promise, and I keep my promises. I'm not going anywhere. The scene was perfect, cinematic in its composition. The diner behind them, bikes lined up, community visible through windows. Emma and Cole in the foreground. Emma's smile was genuine. Hope restored to features that had forgotten what hope felt like. Inside, engines started to rumble. Other members preparing to ride. Cole looked at Emma. Want to go for a ride? Sarah said, it's okay. Emma's enthusiastic yes was immediate. She wrapped her arms around Cole's waist as the engine fired, that familiar rumble that now meant safety instead of fear. The bikes pulled out onto the highway. Formation perfect. Emma's hair flying back, her face tilted toward the sun. Finally free. 1 year later, Emma was thriving. Honor roll student. Regular at the diner. Plans forming for her future. Rick's trial had concluded. Conviction on all counts. 25 years to life for Catherine's murder. Vehicular homicide. Years of systematic child abuse. Justice. Delayed but delivered. Cole found peace he hadn't known in 17 years. Promise fulfilled. Debt paid. Redemption earned. Emma spoke often of joining the military like her father. And Cole's quiet pride was evident to everyone who saw them together. Some promises are worth keeping, some debts are paid in love, and some families are built on broken roads and mended hearts.